it stayed there. So this is not sure if you did this before. This is very unplanned and unscheduled and easy talk that allows the simple people like me, the retail, to learn more about you and also the things you're working on, and in this case Neutron, right? So I am now live with Spaydh. This is how I should call you, I do believe.
Yeah, good job.
And you appeared recently on the Twitter a few months ago within the Cosmos community. You were not very visible, and this is because you work at Neutron or P2P. I'm not really fully sure how it started. And you grew in some popularity. I think you are very visible now. But for those who don't know, I'd like to start, if you don't mind, introducing yourself,
Sure.
how you got to working at P2P Neutron, to the place you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a very long story. In that, yeah, I see Rama has already joined the chat. That's really good. Nice to see you, Rama. It's a long story in that, you know, some people have very straightforward lines into Web3. For me, it was kind of like a very convoluted path. I started, you know, getting interested in crypto like back in 2017, but you know, life happened in between, so I kind of like went on and off. But in a nutshell, the way I ended up working at P2P and now on Neutron is I was back in 2021, early 2021, I started kind of like getting really actively back in crypto. I was a teacher at the time as my day job, and then my, you know, the rest of my life was kind of trying to figure out how Web3 worked. You know, I had solid understanding of how blockchain itself worked, but DeFi had kind of elapsed my my self-education, I guess. And so I was mostly active in Ethereum and Cosmos communities, although because I was still like trying to figure out things, I wasn't really like, you know, publishing anything. So I was kind of like submarine mode. But then eventually I started, you know, getting more active, more involved in the various communities. You know, I was really interested in Cosmos, but arguably not very active in governance or, you know, kind of like just watching everything that was going on. And I was kind of like using Terra a bit at the time. And so, you know, I started kind of like researching and providing like insight into proposals on Astroboard and Mars, you know, giving feedback to the teams there, to some protocols. I, at one point, helped Anchor just run their AMA. So I wasn't involved with the team, but just like trying to help them, you know, kind of like produce debriefs of the content of the AMA, so everybody who missed it could still, you know, like learn from it. And so like one day there was this proposal to upgrade Lido on Terra's Luna derivative from B Luna to ST Luna. And, you know, I had been following the topic and stuff, so I actively engaged with this. And there was this line at the end of the proposal which said like, oh, and by the way, you know, if you have skills that you think we could use at, you know, at P2P, which was running Lido on Terra at the time, you know, message us, and then we'll see, we'll have a chat and see where it goes. And so this is basically what I did. I sent them what I had done, the few threads and reports that I had written by this time. We had a couple of chat, and then a couple of months down the line, I started working at Lido on Terra. Well, I mean, at P2P, but for, you know, as a community manager for Lido on Terra. And then the rest is history. You know, like a couple of months afterwards, there was the big crash. Right when I started, actually, was like a big, you know, kind of like community clash, because the onboarding round was perceived as favoring not enough community-oriented validators. And so like we kind of like took the selection work that we did for Lido at that point and kind of like shuffled it again. We strengthened like the community parameters that we were using, like, so like open source contribution, running IBC relayers, that kind of stuff to respect the voice of the community kind of. So it was kind of funny because like as soon as they got involved, it was basically everything was a huge mess, and it was really interesting trying to, make sure that community members were heard, and that users were protected in the crash, that they had as many opportunities as possible to withdraw their assets from Terra, from the protocol, etc. So that has been a wild ride, but it has been interesting. And so at the time, so that was really, really early when I got into P2P. So that was through the kind of like this separate unit which was running Lido on Terra. But then at this point, the research on how interchain protocols could be implemented as smart contracts in Cosmos was also already going on. And so like progressively, I transitioned into that other unit, which became the DeFi hub building unit once proposal 72 came online, and then which we now know as Neutron, since we found a name for it.
Yeah, I like this story.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel the people like us that are not necessarily technical finally are finding the place in the ecosystem. Like you said, you were just active community member, and you had the certain skills which are absolutely amazing, because you are a great spokesperson for Neutron now, and like everyone see like, hey, this is the guy to talk to. Do you struggle sometimes talking to the tech guys? Because I do have like trying to work with someone, and they just keep going on, and I lose them, or I'm trying to do something with them, and I see how they getting annoyed by me because of being slow and doing the certain task in DAOs or the Web3, and I hear them breathing. Do you experience that?
So I think I'm kind of lucky because the team that we have is somewhat patient with me. It happens fairly often that when I'm writing some of the technical threads for Neutron, I pull someone from the dev team to kind of double check everything, make sure that my understanding is correct. At least roughly, because you can't always go into the full detail of how these systems work, because otherwise it's just not digestible, I guess. So like we have frequent chats about this, and our team has been great in being open, taking the time to explain this. And so I think, I don't know, like for me it's still a learning process. Like there is still a lot that I realize I don't know enough about. Like I know the general systems, I know how they work, and every time I understand that there is something here that I don't understand, I basically do the research, kind of like patch it. But for sure, compared to like, for example, Jack Zampolin, my technical understanding is non-existent, kind of. And so it's kind of like this continual learning process. But I guess like I like this feeling of, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about, because it's kind of the trigger that tells me, oh, okay, so this is something I need to learn, basically. I think that's like a generally good mindset to have in Web3, because these moments are going to keep appearing, especially if you're not from a technical background. So if you don't take it personally, but you just feel like, okay, this is an occasion to learn, then that's how you really grow, I think.
Like we were talking about the Terra collapse and Lido, Lido, how do you say?
Lido, actually.
Lido. And Lido existing on Terra. And I wonder, was your move right now, what P2P is doing with Neutron, result of what happened with Terra? Because obviously you lost like big market share.
No,
and
I can definitely say that it's not, because like actually we were already researching how to build Neutron before the collapse happened. We started researching it kind of like not at the peak, but just like before the peak. So at this point, from a business perspective, everything was going very well. So like the crash was definitely not the reason why we started this work.
Yeah, like because it was almost after ask you, it would seem like this, right? It aligned, it crashing. We are trying to onboard the
Yeah,
community
for
to
sure.
the
Which is pretty unfortunate, to be honest, because I think a lot of it boils down to the fact that like our technical team has actually been working on this for more than 6 months, like perhaps more than this. But because it was kind of like not being publicly announced or talked about, as a community, we don't really have visibility on this. And then we were kind of planning to stay in stealth mode for a while longer. But then Proposal 72 was published onto the Cosmos forum, and we were like, well, actually, this aligns pretty well with our vision. Using interchain security, helping interchain security go to market and stuff. And so we were, when we saw this, we were like, okay, well, we'll probably have to, shuffle our timeline a bit and go public a bit earlier, but let's do it. And so, so that's kind of why, like the DeFi hub idea and Neutron kind of surfaced to the public at this point. But actually it had been in the works for quite a while before.
Yeah. Before we get to like interchain security and why you chose this path, because I feel before the Prop 72, no one really knew much about P2P. But if you look at the Cosmos history, the P2P was here from the very beginning. It's very experienced team, but it also seemed to me that P2P, the main focus of P2P before wasn't really on Cosmos, despite Cosmos being P2P validator. They do have the staking services. I think not sure if that's how they started, but and Cosmos was one of the first proof of stake platforms, right? So and P2P was, Cosmos was one of the first proof of stake platforms. But then after that, it seems that P2P had the other focus, right? And building Lido, having staked Ether, then moving to Terra. Why is that? Was it that
I think it's another case of like, so at P2P we have this kind of like quirk of most of the company is actually very technically oriented. And so, you have all these smart guys who are kind of like spending most of their time figuring out, how these systems work in detail, contributing to tooling, kind of like figuring out how to make the validators that we're running better, more efficient, more stable and stuff. But because everybody's so focused on the technical side, we're actually pretty bad at, letting everyone know what we're doing, kind of welcoming, two-sided interaction with the community. That's something that, we've been trying to ramp up and get better at for quite a while now. I mean, like me getting hired is kind of like the beginning of this effort to, communicate a bit more about what we're doing, getting feedback from the community to guide our efforts as well. And like, there's a lot where we like a lot of room for improvement there still. It's just that it takes a while to build this kind of capability inside an org, especially one that has been, very, very, very focused on the tech kind of.
You said like, oh, you're thinking about this for the past 7 months. Is it because P2P sees that like, hey, maybe the Cosmos is the place for the next thing to happens, or I don't know, any other reason? Like,
basically that. So I think we tend to put our money where our mouth is. So as Rama pointed out, our founder, probably the company as well, was an ICO investor. The Cosmos vision makes sense to us. And I guess our thesis with building Neutron is, the app chain world, the interchain itself has the potential to be kind of one of the most significant ecosystems with Ethereum, because they have like very different paradigm, right? So they're actually not competing directly. There are different ways of solving the kind of like blockchain scalability problem. And so you can imagine a world where Ethereum is still like perhaps the main ecosystem, but then Cosmos as a whole, right? So the Interchain actually is kind of like the second largest. That's the world that kind of makes sense to us, and so we're trying to help bring that timeline about, I guess. Like we see Neutron as kind of the tip of the spear in kind of like pioneering interoperability between zones, like connecting everybody, allowing a new form of protocol to be launched conveniently in Cosmos, like via smart contracts, which understandably have been kind of underserved in Cosmos because of the focus on the app chains. I think like all the development we have had for app chains are incredible. We just think that it's also useful to have flexibility in the way you actually release your products, and to make sure that the smart contracts themselves can also interoperate with all the app chains, because that's how we get the most composable kind of ecosystem possible. And we think that it's a useful property to have if we want this ecosystem to really thrive.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's really interesting, so for those who don't know, Neutron is the layer 1. So essentially, this is the blockchain that allows people to build interesting applications on that, right? I guess there is no limit to applications beyond the imagination of people. For those who don't know what it means like Ethereum, but other chain. But you did chose a little bit, because many people thought that interchain security serves best for the app specific chain. So the difference, for those who don't know, is the app specific chain serve on the one purpose. It could be something more like Osmosis, right, which is decentralized exchange. Well, it has maybe few other properties, but I didn't see this discussion that like we would have layer 1 actually secured by interchain security. And this is quite rare, because I would imagine that layer 1s would choose their own security. What it means, own set of validators that will be securing the network by production of the new blocks. So what I would like to know, why Neutron did choose, because it's really like seem you put yourself maybe lower, like by not being your own sovereign chain, but actually you are here and you are saying, hey, we are going to utilize the Cosmos Hub security. Is there any benefits
There
by
are,
this?
yeah, significant actually. So there are multiple layers to the answer. The first one, from a very like business oriented kind of perspective, is simply that if you're launching as a fully independent L1 blockchain with your own validator set and stake-in token, then the degree of security that the protocol is launching on top of your
Sorry, it was me.
Are we okay?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So guys, I'm really sorry for that. I lost you, Spaydh. If you hear me,
Yeah, I can.
I moved
Can
to
you
the
hear me?
new place that meant to have 5G in this environment, but it does seems that it's not ideal, and it does disconnect every 10 or 20 minutes. And with that, right now, I actually cannot hear you, Spaydh. I'm trying to reconnect my headphones.
Fingers crossed.
And I hear you now, but not in the headphones. So let's
Testing 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, I hear, but it's weird because it doesn't go via to here. But I might use for well, really embarrassing. Sorry for these issues.
I'm personally not too bothered. These things happen, so
Yeah, I
bear with us, guys. Bear
you
with
know,
us.
if you don't hear yourself echoing, I just take off
Yeah,
my
I
headphones.
think it's
You
fine.
know.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Hmm. Okay. Or can you say again?
Yeah,
Like this
sure.
is the like.
Testing 1 2 1 2. Shipping in
I think it's on the
progress.
headphones. I think it's on the headphones now. So it's
Okay, great.
so sorry for losing a few. I might edit this later. I have this possibility.
Okay.
Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So the question was, what are the benefits of launching a smart contract platform with interchain security rather than with its own validator set? So there are various ones. In the future, one of the benefits would be that it's probably faster than finding the validators, bootstrapping the set, et cetera, et cetera. But because interchain security has not been released yet, that's not one of the benefits that we'll get from this. One of the benefits that we will indeed benefit from, though, is like economic security itself, because if you have your own validator set, the demand for your token is going to condition the amount of security that the products launching on top of it are going to benefit from. And so, especially in the first phases where your token is not very well integrated, it's not extremely liquid, it's not in high demand, you can have like very large fluctuations in price and in security as a result. And this is like far from ideal, especially if you intend to bootstrap, TVL intensive protocols, fairly soon. What I mean by TVL intensive protocol is like everything that requires you to deposit large amounts of token. For example, like DEXs, when you provide liquidity, the TVL there can really skyrocket. Money markets, liquid staking. And so inheriting your security from the Cosmos hub allows you to have like a much larger runway in terms of how much protocols on your chain can scale before they start being, a honeypot, like a bounty that is large enough to make for it to make sense to actually attack your chain to try and extract some value out of your protocol. So that's the first thing. Like the security there is very important. The second thing, I guess, is we want Neutron to be the kind of like spearhead of the Interchain's growth, and that implies a certain degree of alignment with the rest of the ecosystem. A good first step to create this alignment is to have this very close relationship with the hub. The way interchain security works is quite interesting because it's kind of a you can say renting your security, but in effect, what it does is that the more like Neutron gives 25% of the transaction fees it generates to the Cosmos Hub validators and staker for securing Neutron, right? But that creates additional revenue for Atom stakers and delegators and validators, and this revenue it has value in itself. Like you want to be exposed to tokens that are generating organic yield, kind of. And that's one way that the hub is going to generate organic yield. And so because it has this added benefit now, Atom is more valuable. And so the amounts of security that the Cosmos Hub enjoy kind of should increase. But if it's more secure, then Neutron is also more secure, which makes its block space more appealing, right? And so you can have more protocols launching on top of it or scaling bigger, which means more fees, which means a more secure hub, which means a more secure Neutron, which means more fees. And you have this kind of like virtuous cycle that kind of goes on. And that, I think, is a great way to align the interest of Neutron and the Cosmos hub, kind of. So that's the first step. And then as we develop Neutron and as time passes, we'll be looking for ways that we can, make sure that we have meaningful contributions and relationship with, all the relevant platforms and app chains in Cosmos, because the way we see Neutron is really as this kind of, hub that kind of connects and transmit orders and assets around blockchains and allows kind of like connecting the interchain DeFi space much more closely than it has been so far, I guess.
This is like I do try to think a lot about the value here. And there was a lot of talks about the tokenomics. Even now I'm trying to think, would be beautiful if we would not have the atom token, because then like you would have all of the other chains providing you value, so that makes all of them valuable. What I'm aiming at here is we have atom tokens, and as interchain security grows, the value of this token that essentially is responsible for providing the security grows higher. And there was some concerns that because of this, the consumer chains tokens might be less valuable in eyes of the people, and with that it could create those ghost chains over here, because of the people swapping the rewards of the other chains towards atom, because that's where is the largest value, essentially the security of everything. And I wonder if you at Neutron did think about those issues to actually make sure that this token that Neutron will have will be valuable. What is the solution to that? Because I understand this. Sorry for like going on. I understand the
No.
Atom, the security token, Neutron, the economy token within Neutron ecosystem for like all the DeFi tools, etc. So that's essentially Neutron is the money here. For many people don't like this naming. So yeah, I'm thinking if you did think at Neutron about those issues, what's the solution to that? Is the less of the increasing supply in comparison to the atom? What are the solutions?
Yeah, I think it's not just about like inflation or very kind of like very fundamental economic levers like this. It's at a very basic level, whether or not you're interchain secured, if you're handing out some of your tokens to people as rewards for whatever, being a staker, being a liquidity provider, whatever, if there is a better asset that people want to keep their value in, denominated in, then they will always have this opportunity to swap it to the other asset, right? This is why Bitcoin is still so big and it has been scaled with the ecosystem, because people consider it as safer, or you don't need to be interchain secured for this kind of effect of people want to keep Atom to apply to you. The only thing that you can do about this is basically to make sure that your token itself has intrinsic value, that it has utility, that it serves a purpose, that it is useful to the economy of the zone you're building, basically. And so that is very much the design philosophy we're trying to follow. Basically, our kind of like guiding principle while designing the fundamental economic systems of Neutron is really, okay, so one, how do we ensure that teams launching on top of Neutron have the highest chances of finding product market fit, and in this way accessing a profitable business, basically. So that's the first thing. How do we make sure that users kind of stick around, benefit from participating in the economy of the zone? How do we make sure that the value kind of like continues to cycle through users, protocols, validators, to make sure that this kind of like economic cycle keeps on going? And how do we make sure that we're sponsoring the growth of long-term oriented projects like infrastructure, public goods? And so we're dedicating a lot of resources to thinking about public good funding as it's a separate thing that needs to be addressed via tokenomics, via governance systems. And so when we haven't finalized the systems there, but when we do and we are able to make announcements, I think people will be a bit surprised, because we're very likely to be pioneering kind of like very radically different implementations of governance and tokenomics in general. So that's like, personally, I think that this is very exciting, and I'm kind of like looking forward to sharing more about this.
Yeah, like because I'm excited about Neutron, but this is so because it wasn't done before. I think that's why it's confusing, because like that's why the questions come here. But Neutron will still require their own set of validators for the governance. Is that correct?
No, actually. So like,
can you tell me that? Yeah.
I mean, actually, so like at the technical level, it's actually a very good and very interesting questions, because depending on how you implement your governance, you could, for example, there's one way to do it, which is you have a module, which is the owner, like the account module that allows you to kind of like set the owner of various parameters and systems. And you can set it to smart contracts, to wallets, to other modules and stuff. So like this gives you a lot of flexibility, or you can go through the kind of like traditional SDK module governance, or you can implement everything as small contracts on top. Like there are various ways that you can implement the governance for your zone. And so if you opted to go through the kind of like SDK governance in the context of interchain security, you would end up in this like weird but very interesting situation where, to express their voting power, people would still have to register validators, but validators that actually don't produce blocks, but that kind of like serve as governators in a way. And so like you end up with this indirect representative democracy system, which is pretty interesting. We're just not sure that the UX is great here, because the system hasn't been designed for this purpose. It's kind of like it ends up being capable of doing that if you want it. But so we're likely to take a slightly different approach, where we're going to be most likely implementing a lot of our governance as modularized smart contracts on top of Neutron instead of as module, which has different trade-offs. And so like some people have been kind of like warning us about the risk of not using the traditional SDK module, which has been very extensively battle tested now in many chains for a long period of time. And this is very understandable, but at the same time, there are smart contracts that have been battle tested when it comes to governance. I'm not going to name drop, but you probably see which ones I'm talking about. And then the other way you can increase the safety there is by modularizing them. So instead of having one governance smart contract that handles everything and is extremely complex, you can basically break down every area of governance, be it like governing specific technical parameters, governing economic parameters, governing like community funds, that kind of stuff, and you can break them down into separate smart contracts, so that and introduce backstops, so that if ever there is a problem somewhere and one of these contracts has a vulnerability, then it only affects a very small part of governance, which is not something you can really realistically do when you're dealing with governance as one module that is fully integrated, I guess. So it's a different trade-off here.
Do I understand it right? Like I don't know, some sort of so you don't have to use the validators, but you create governing system in sort of like republics within the Neutron ecosystem that is not related to security, but just to simply manage the chain.
If we had opted to go through the Cosmos SDK voting system, like the governance module of the Cosmos SDK, we would have had a kind of like governor or governator system where validator-like entities which doesn't produce block would receive delegations and then be able to cast them, and their votes could be overwritten by users, just like today in most of the Cosmos chains. We're opting for a bit of a different implementation, and so you won't need to register a fake validator to actually express your voting power. Your voting power will be taken into account as soon as you stake your tokens, basically. So you won't have to go through this kind of like convoluted system, but it would have been possible. And yeah, That's it. Your understanding was correct, but I just wanted to clarify this point because
Yeah. What will be the process in choosing the governing entities? Will it be like more of the centralized process coming from the Neutron of deciding, hey, we think that is the best, or will be more like the community-driven process?
also like the voting power will be driven by the distribution of the voting token, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to be introducing a governing body for Neutron. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, realistically, the first, for now, for example, there is no token, so there is no proxy for governance to be expressed. I mean, there is no zone yet. It's mostly just code in a repository that will become a testnet very soon. Anyway, and so like for the process here until kind of like mainnet launch, the launch of governance, most of the development and strategic orientation will be led by P2P. But then, progressively, once we introduce governance and the token, then that's where the kind of like the path to decentralization really starts for Neutron, and we'll not, have a committee or start kind of deciding this. At the same time, for specific areas of governance, like grants, for example, where we haven't made any decisions but we're considering like various options, because so my opinion is that in practice, having huge community funds that can be spent kind of arbitrarily to fund various innovations and development makes sense, but it's also not very efficient because you end up with few standards on how the money should be spent, on how the process to apply for this money should be structured, on how the due diligence in the application is done. And so like I think a lot of the perhaps like less successful governance spend on Cosmos Hub, for example, have been due to this lack of structure, like pre-planned structure kind of. So for grants, we're exploring other opportunities. One of the ones that I'm personally kind of interested in, like nothing confirmed here, is just discussing for the sake of discussing what is possible. What we're thinking about is having VE tokenomics with liquidity mining gauges. You vote with your VE tokens for different gauges, and then the protocol or the entity on the other end of that gauge receives some amount of token of incentives per epoch that they can spend for protocols on liquidity mining. So like they have to give them to the user. So it's a way for them to drive activity and revenue to them, but they can't just keep the tokens. But one of the potential use case for these gauges is you can actually have grant allocators on the receiving end of these gauges. And so the way it would work, kind of like at the conceptual level, is, okay, I'm going to propose being a grant allocator. I'm going to receive applications, and I'm going to do very good due diligence. And then I'm only going to select the most interesting protocols. And then when I find one, I'm going to give them the incentives that I receive, right? And perhaps there is a mechanism there that they can earn some kind of percentage on either the performance of the project they help fund or the spend that they kind of like triggered. The mechanism here should be thought out carefully, because you want to incentivize good spending of grant money and not just like spending everything you can to get that percent in income. But so this person would have the ability to disburse some incentive to kind of like make new projects and tooling or whatever happen. And the idea of having a gauge for this is that people can review the performance of different allocators, and then they can vote for which one they think did the best job, right? So let's say one has funded a project that was a rug pull, then probably I'm not going to vote for him next epoch, right? But if this guy founded a very interesting, multi-sig that has been used by everyone since then okay, this guy funds interesting stuff, so I can vote for his gauge instead, and then he will continue to use that money to fund like interesting stuff. So that's one possibility. The other, like another alternative, is to have kind of like grant allocator committees that are formed with people from the community, and then like one possible implementation, at least for the first few months, is to have kind of like groups of people forming to review applications and give out grants. And then just to ensure that they're not, giving themselves money and running away with it, you have somebody from, either a multi-sig of ecosystem, partners, or like I don't know, maybe Confio, Informal Link, or whatever partner would be interested in participating in this, or for like P2P, for example, kind of like double signing this transaction after checking that they're not, just trying to run away with the money. That's another way it can be done. But in any case, we're kind of like looking at all these different ways, and more specifically how they can be implemented in practice at the zones level. It's likely that these features won't roll out directly at launch, but like soon after, because first we want to make sure people have the time to actually learn how to use all of the features of Neutron, get used to it. We want to make sure that these features are battle tested before we roll out new features. But we're kind of like doing a lot of research on this field as well, because being able to fund additional development is really crucial to the success of your zone, and so that's something we dedicate a lot of resources to as well.
Yeah. So you spoke of funding, and this is interesting to me. Many projects, what they do, especially with the projects launching on Cosmos, a lot of them are community driven. With that, they don't have funding officially, and they try to use the community pool, which is composed of their own tokens, and the value of the community pool depends on how these tokens are valued by the certain market condition, which is often misleading, right? Because you see the pool that is a community pool that maybe has $200 million worth of tokens, which doesn't have reality, because at the certain liquidity that could be only $5 million, right? So which is very little funding. And I wonder if you guys at Neutron consider that, and if you maybe plan to do actually some OTC trades, some funding to actually have the diversified portfolio of the assets, even like fiat currency or stable coins, to have this pool and manage this in this
fiat
manner.
is kind of tricky because you can't really put it on chain. You can only you have to tokenize it and then put it on chain, but then it's a stable coin, not fiat currency.
Right.
Like I don't think we've given any thought in kind of like putting OTC trading on chain. I think this is kind of like a separate thing that perhaps can be built on top of Neutron. Like that would be interesting, but that's not something we've been actively working on. That being said, like some of the developments that we're kind of excited about is, one, we're looking to get collateralized depth position stablecoin built on Neutron fairly soon after launch. Most likely the basic mechanism there would be that you can collateralize, you can borrow stable coins like you borrow DAI, kind of. So let's call it Quark, for example. You could, for example, borrow Quark against LPs composed of stable coins, for example. So let's say Axelar USDC and whatever other stablecoin, maybe IST, right? So Axelar USDC, IST, you deposit the liquidity, you get the LP shares, you can put the LP shares in a vault and then borrow Quark against it. And then that Quark can kind of serve as a general, like the main source of liquidity and the main pair in the ecosystem to emulate kind of like one of the nice properties of Terra, which was that the whole ecosystem was built around one stablecoin, and that made the user experience so much better, and kind of avoided a lot of like liquidity fracturation and stuff like this. So we're going to have this stablecoin, and one of the features that we're kind of like exploring to one, make sure that we have the ability to continuously fund important initiative even through market downturns, is the fact that some of the fees would be burned to accrue value to the zone's native token so that its value can scale with the adoption of the zone. But then the rest would be swapped to stablecoins and kept in a treasury. Potentially, this treasury could be made of diversified assets. So, for example, we could have, liquid staking derivatives of Atom tokens, stablecoins, Neutron tokens. The idea, Neutron tokens probably not, because we already have those in the kind of like grants pool, community pool, incentives pool, etc. So we want to have different types of collateral that we can potentially disperse. So this is kind of like the Neutron fee treasury. And we're exploring how we can deploy it. Like, one way it can be used is to find some kind of algorithm to pay out stablecoin-based yield to stakers during downturns. The algorithm itself is kind of tricky to figure out because, simple implementations kind of rely on, you take the market average for however many weeks or months, and then when you're below this average, then you start paying out stable coins. Like that's a naive implementation, but the good property there is that, the more your token loses value, the higher the yield it generates, because the yield that it pays out is more and more based in stable coins, and so it doesn't depreciate with the coin itself. That's one property. The other way you can use it is to kind of have your grants program or your incentives or your liquidity mining gauges kind of use these stable coins, so that funding can still occur even when the market is going down, basically.
Yeah, like I was about to ask you if you would use the Neutron as collateral, because that would be you would open the possibility to algorithmic rug pull. That's because how I would view it, if you loan against the Neutron, you open yourself to the speculation that someone can crash the price of Neutron. That would cause the liquidation wave, and with that you just crash in the token. But you end up with stable coins because still, but that would be quite dangerous move, right? Like it's
I think the difference here is that Neutron, so it's not going to be a Neutron managed stablecoin, right? It's going to be a protocol on top of Neutron. So perhaps this protocol will have its own governance token, right? So the situation here is a bit different from, if you could use maker tokens to collateralize DAI. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about using ETH to collateralize DAI.
That's why I mentioned that you said it wouldn't be Neutron. So you actually answered the questions I would have. There was some at the very beginning. I'm not sure if it was addressed, but maybe you can. So sometimes when we do have the chain after upgrade, we end up with a bug. That happened, for example. I will bring the example of Osmosis. I think there was upgrade. What happened? There was a bug, and the liquidity pools started to be drained, right? And with your own set of validators, you have just possibility to stop the chain. Like, you just communicate with validators, hey, let's stop it, we need to halt it. Can you tell me how it would work in the Neutron case? Let's say you do the upgrade, there is vulnerability, and someone is draining something, because of this mistake, how you are able to stop it. To
I think
manage the losses.
So two things. The first thing is like Neutron, because it's not like a product specific app chain, would there is, the only value that can be drained from Neutron is kind of the not talking about the protocols on top of it, but if there is a vulnerability in Neutron's code, the only things that can be drained are kind of like the network's equity, which is already really bad, right? So like, for example, the community fund, the Neutron fee treasury kind of. So that's one thing. Like, you can't, it wouldn't necessarily allow you to drain the equity, or the value from other protocols on top of Neutron. The second thing is that actually, I think it would happen, what would happen is pretty similar to what happened on Osmosis. The Neutron community would just coordinate with the validator set of the Cosmos hub, and then we would halt the chain, and then we would make an upgrade, merge it to the mainline code, ask everybody to update, and then relaunch the chain afterwards.
Well, that could be. I'm sorry for just because some people have the vision that Cosmos Hub will ecosystem of millions of chains, probably not all of them secured by the hub, but let's say we get 200 chains secured by the Cosmos, and if one of these chains has certain issues and you have to coordinate it with the Cosmos Hub
the bandwidth
validators,
of the validators kind of gets split across more and more and more chains. Yeah, I get this point.
Would it be that you have to hold 200 chains and essentially killed everything for a few days?
No, that wouldn't as far as I know, once again, I'm not a developer myself. I'm not involved directly in the development of interchain security, so I'm always open to making a mistake. But as far as I know, no, because interchain security doesn't what it does is it allows one chain to manage the set of another chain. So basically, the Cosmos Hub keeps track of the voting power, and it lets Neutron know who are the validators, who are how much voting power they have, who got slashed, and that kind of stuff. And then Neutron, on the other hand, also kind of keeps track of things. And if a validator fails their duty, they can send a message to ask the Cosmos Hub to slash their atoms, right? But actually, at the infrastructure level, the validators, the node operators, they're actually running separate nodes for all the different networks, right? And so if one node, if the network that is running on that node explodes, it doesn't necessarily contaminate the other nodes. And so that is why it's interesting to launch the smart contract platform on top of Neutron rather than the hub. Because if something catastrophic happens with Neutron, let's say, for example, a non-deterministic kind of issue, there have been a couple on Juno, unfortunately. If that happened on Neutron would go down, but the hub would continue running. So that's one of the properties. So if some kind of catastrophic event like this happened on, in this context of 200 interchain secured chain, then one node, one network would go down, but not the entire thing. The issue there, though, is because validators are running separate nodes for all of these networks, they need to have the infrastructure, the bandwidth, the team to be available to actually do a proper job at running all of these, right? And so in the near future, it's, in my opinion, somewhat unrealistic to believe that, Atom will be securing 200 chains simply because, not all the validators can handle securing 200 networks at the same time and getting anyway. So that's it will be much more progressive than this, I believe. And eventually another interesting feature is that, interchain security should, the path for interchain security is to eventually enable mesh security, where one zone can still be secured by the Cosmos Hub, for example. So in the case of Neutron, possible paths include one, in every path, let's say we still are secured by the Cosmos Hub, but then on top of that security and the fees that we're paying for this, we also have the choice to, for example, take security from Juno and take security from Osmosis, take security from Evmos as well. And we pay every other chain a portion of the fees proportionate to the security they bring us as well. And another option is also to have our own validator set. So I guess it makes it even more of a mess when it comes to coordinating with the validators, because you would have an even larger kind of validator set to manage. But it's also interesting in a way because you could end up having the ability to coordinate enough of the voting power securing the chain without actually coordinating everyone from one of the provider chains. Kind of. So all of this is kind of very new technology, and it's a very new paradigm. So I'm not sure I imagine correctly everything that's going to happen and stuff, but it's for sure going to be very interesting and exciting to explore. And we're trying to really put the efforts into thinking about how governance work in the context of interchain
Mm-hmm.
security, how chain upgrades work, how network parameter changes work in the context of interchain security. As you mentioned, like how exploit response works in the context of interchain
Mm-hmm.
security. So, like this is my opinion and my like to the best of my ability, but then perhaps there are things that I'm missing as well because it's a very kind of
Yeah.
like bleeding edge field.
Those really like good, because then like as you said, like at first it looks like very optimistic, but every solution brings a problem, right? Like securing too many chains, and then on top of that, okay, we probably will find solution, we can borrow security from different zones, but that also brings the coordination issues maybe, right? And like but as we progress, there is always the I guess there is always the solution coming. I wonder, uh, does Neutron or you personally have your favorite Cosmos apps that you find really interesting and you think, wow, that's amazing?
Cosmosm or Cosmos?
Cosmosm, because you will be Cosmosm platform, right? So like I guess you should
Oh, that's a tricky one.
you should know a little bit.
Okay, so I guess one of the apps that I've been eagerly waiting to see the full potential of initially launched as a Cosmosm implementation, and now they're building their own chain. It's like Mars Protocol. I'm
Mhm,
extremely interested in seeing how the PID, so the controller for the interest rate, is going to work
mhm,
in production.
mhm,
Um, I mean, this has been like tremendously delayed because of the collapse of Terra, where they
mhm,
released initially. So that's one of them. But then actually, there are a ton of interesting protocols being built at this time. I think Penumbra is kind of cool. I think
but it's a chain, right? Like it's a full chain. Um, Penumbra. I'm not sure. Mars is initially on Osmosis, right? As the app, or they
no, no,
gonna
no. So
start.
like Mars launched on Terra first, and then since the crash, they have started building their own chain. And so the way it's going to
Right.
work is that it's going to have outposts, kind of like small
Mm-hmm.
implementations on various chains. So like
Mm-hmm.
Osmosis and others. Um, and so they're using a lot of interesting technologies as well to kind of
Mm-hmm.
keep track of the liquidity and collateral and LTV of
Mm-hmm.
users across various zones, and it like with everything kind of being managed and synchronized at their hub. So that's quite interesting
Mm-hmm.
to me. Um, Otherwise, what else? Cosm was some cool stuff.
Or we can go to even, because if you are a smart contract platform, I often like do call those both apps and contracts together because it's easier to explain to community. So contracts, is there any contracts that you WASM contracts that you find very interesting?
I mean, so like a suite of contracts, I guess, would be DAO. Big fan of what they've been building.
Okay, that answer I was expecting. It's
Yeah,
actually from a friend. So I was like, do you have any questions? And well, just see if they know anything. And, of course, the DAO would be like perfect example.
yeah,
you know.
yeah. So I mean, obviously DAO is a good example. Like honestly, I'm struggling because like I can think of like about 10 protocols that I'm really excited to
Mhm.
see potentially like launch on Neutron, for example. But
Mhm.
then like which one is my favorite is really a difficult question. Um, I guess like the reason why Mars came to mind is probably because I got burned like in it so badly when Terra
Mhm.
crashed. But that's it.
Mhm.
It's stuck to my mind, I guess. But yeah,
I mhm.
go ahead.
I do like because DAO I do look forward for this, because I'm learning more because I'm trying to get engaged in some project as the also non-technical person, and you
Mhm.
discover that products like DAO is not just for building token and DAO tokens, but it's for management of the teams. It's great
Yeah.
tool. And as we do it, like we're actually not using we're not gonna use DAO because it doesn't offer enough just yet. Like you have the contracts for team management on Ethereum or on Polygon that are more advanced. So I'm looking for actually DAO to bring those all possibilities for actually managing the team, like the team at Neutron, right? Like that you can just have your own space via DAO built with DAO tooling, right? So
I agree.
I
One of
I
the features that I think is really interesting is kind of like the way they're implementing sub-DAOs as well,
Mhm,
because one of the issues that we see from DAOs is that you know or horizontal org structures are very nice in terms of sharing the power throughout the organization, but they're not
mhm,
necessarily always very efficient. And like you need to find some balance between horizontal and vertical so that you can have the power being distributed as much as possible while still having
mhm,
the ability to have committees kind of focusing on doing something very efficiently and then kind of like being accountable to the rest of the DAO. And so
mhm.
having these sub DAOs and the ability to kind of like combine them within a DAO allows you to have very versatile like organizational structure. So that's
Mhm.
one of the things that I'm most interested in,
Mhm.
I guess.
So with that, is there possibility that once Neutron launches, it will be okay to use DAO with Neutron as well, right? Because it's essentially.
Well, let's just say that there will be very, very welcome to Neutron in any case. So, but yeah,
So
there's a lot
are
of
you
like,
saying? Sorry, I don't want to tease on people because they already. But are you saying if there are developers who are not happy, sometimes they just can very easily move, right? Like it should be very liquid movement between different platforms if they just
yeah, if,
find
if you
better
launch
funding
your
or.
protocol as a smart contract on Cosmosm, moving to
Mhm,
Neutron or deploying another instance of your smart contracts on Neutron will
mhm,
require minimal efforts because, um, because the VM is the same essentially. Like you
right.
might need to, so like if you don't need or don't want to kind of use Neutron's features when it comes to interchain accounts and interchain queries,
Mhm,
then there will be even less efforts because you will not even need to learn how these work. If you want to use them, you will still need to go through the
right.
documentation, understand the system, and then connect your smart contracts to the right bindings so that you can actually use these. Um, so that's one thing, and then perhaps there will be some edits to make to your smart contracts if they deal with stuff like
Mhm,
governance or the zone's kind of like native token in a way.
mhm,
So like you
mhm,
might need to adapt a bit to this. And the last thing that I can see is probably like if you want to participate in the liquidity mining gauge system, then you will probably need to register like either a contract or a wallet address, like an account where you can receive the incentives, and you will need to, like join this kind of like system.
mhm.
So that's a tiny amount of work as well. But other than that, like moving, from one Cosmos chain to another is actually fairly straightforward.
Mhm. Um, what I wonder, because there was some accusations, maybe accusations is too big of the word.
Are you going to drag me
Um,
into
but
drama, Don?
no, I don't. I actually don't do it. Many people like just like when I tweet, maybe it looks like this. I think most of the people is like it looks usually worse on the Twitter than it is in
Yeah,
reality.
yeah.
I mean, some people express that what Neutron could potentially do is cannibalizing, you know, the Juno in the way that we have the brain shortage within the Cosmos ecosystem, right? So, as Neutron appears, some people can view it. Hey, this is maybe they will have better funding, right? Maybe they will
Hmm.
accommodate us devs better, and with that, then the devs could move, let's say, from Juno to Neutron, or from Neutron to Juno, from Neutron Juno to Celestia, whatever other Cosmos chain that there will be, and that actually creates this sort of brain drain in the ecosystem. I think I heard few people mention that was, for example, the Frey, who is the validator on Juno. And I did was concerned about this. I'm not sure if I agree with this, but wonder if you have opinion on that.
So, like, I think I have a few points on this. So the first one is that, like, draining Juno of developers or activity is not really our point. Like, the whole point of Neutron is enabling interactions between various platforms and app chains, right? And so, like, having stuff deploy on Neutron doesn't mean that they need to stop working on Juno. On the contrary, the whole point of Neutron is to make sure there is as much activity as possible on every chain and platform possible. And so, for example, there is a world where Neutron and Juno win together because they communicate and they exchange stuff via interchain accounts, IBC. They exchange information, data, and stuff, and everybody accrues fees, which helps them, kind of like continue to incentivize various projects and stuff like this. So that's the first thing. It doesn't need to be necessarily adversarial there. The second thing is that we're definitely looking at ways to bring new developers into the space, so that we're not just cannibalizing kind of like the pie of existing Cosmos developers. In that regard, I think what the Interchain Academy is doing, and more specifically what the Cosmos Academy is fantastic, and we're happy to provide support there in any ways we can. So that's one thing. Eventually, once we're able to focus, like once the chain is launched and the project starts driving some adoption, we'll be looking at trying to either co-organize or co-sponsor hackathons, trying to reach new devs, trying to bring new people into the ecosystem, participating into educating people, training them how to become devs and stuff. So all of this. And then I guess my last point is you can't really fork community. Like, what makes Juno so special and arguably a bit weird, but also very valuable, is that it has a very radical approach to community, and that is something that it's you can try to reproduce it. It's probably not going to happen. Neutron is very likely to have a different type of community. We want we'd like Neutron's governance to be minimized in terms of the systems, but also kind of like more pragmatic when it comes to like economic decisions. And then so like the profile of the community that Neutron will get is probably going to be very different from Juno's community, and so that makes it so that both zones are actually meaningful additions to the space. Like, the way I see it, one of the beauty of Juno is that it's been a great driver of people getting more actively involved in Cosmos, right? So that there's like a lot of community members who didn't participate in governance before, who started participating in governance because they were involved in Juno. There's a lot of people who became developers or started learning how to code small contracts, or because they were actively engaged in Juno. And I think this is a role that Juno can continue to perform very well for years to come, even if Neutron is successful. And especially if Neutron is successful, because then all of the products that people can innovate on and launch on Juno can also connect with Neutron, with the rest of like the interchain, and start having kind of like this economic loop that is like more with more churn and more breadth, so that actually more value accrues to everybody. I guess that's the way I see it.
It's great take. Especially I must say from my own experience, I wasn't so much into governance before Juno, because it always seemed that the governance was so irrelevant to the upgrade, to the who wants to engage into this, right? Like, it doesn't seem like you want to be bothered. And this was the first change.
Once to say that you agree with everybody else, because anyway, that's what we're going to do. Yeah, it's sometimes like this. Yeah.
And here was Juno. Also, what you see with the governance, and I actually think it's great. At first, you see, hey, I matter. I can do this. As the time goes, you also start seeing everything what's worst about heavy governance and everything what's good from it. And often you get sick of it, and you think that, hey, maybe I would like to have also the chain where we don't focus on the community control, but rather wants to focus on the difference. So you actually can find the place for yourself, and I think that would be a great place for Neutron, while Juno. I think both can actually complement each other really well, because Juno, with what it is, like fully community, and it's like, hey, we do whatever we vote for or whatever we decide. It opens the playground for really massive experimentation. And once you finish experimenting, you can actually go to Neutron and deploy that finished project, like, which I think those both are success here, which I would see here, like, and maybe many people wouldn't like this take, but I'm not sure if you're aware of the Chihuahua chain that suffer from like completely not having devs, and they wanted to be the experimental playground, for Cosmos. But I actually think, but the Juno wants to be since the start experimental playground, so maybe it's Juno to experiment, right? And the others. I think it was really great take, and we can definitely live in the world where those two ecosystems complement each other in the certain way. You mentioned to me that you could name like 10 applications that are planned to be developed on Neutron, and I
No,
wonder
that's
if
not exactly what I said. I said that I could
I'm sorry.
name dozens of very interesting applications that I would like to see deployed on Neutron, but I am not. I would love to name drop all the teams we're in talks with, but at the same time, like I don't feel like it would be very fair to them to name drop them.
It seems I lost Spaydh, and I think it's fault this time, because I see that it's his internet connection that drops here. So if anyone wants to comment anything, we have a short break now because Spaydh dropped, and I think he can come back soon. If he can't recover the connection, he can just follow the same link to come. Yeah. Okay, this was very fast, and this time it's your fault.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Well,
It was your
I guess they're even
because
then.
it was your internet connection dropping for a moment, and sometimes when it just like it can drop for a few seconds and you're gone, right? So,
yeah.
so
Yeah, I
the
was just saying, like, there are many applications that we're very interested in seeing on Neutron. There are many applications that we are in very close and very good talks with in terms of launching on Neutron, but we haven't, like, we don't want to name drop who until we have kind of like reached a state where we know that these are the whatever like relationship is going to look like, that they are happy, comfortable to commit on launching a Neutron and stuff like this, basically. So unfortunately, everybody will have to wait until I can write a thread about which protocol is going to be.
So I should not even push you trying to name one contract that is going to be developed on Neutron that you think like, hey, this is something wow.
I'll just say that if you look closely at which protocol have been engaging with our Twitter feed, you might get some insight on who's interested. It's not going to tell you the full picture by far. You're going to be missing a lot of the protocols that are potentially interested, but you can probably tell a couple of them from our Twitter feed. So the hunt is open.
Sorry for the question, but people, what drives big adoption and interest of people is the
Airdrop.
airdrops.
Yep, I knew. Yeah,
and
same.
and
So
and it Mhm.
like the thing is like one, airdrops are tricky because even if you know exactly how you're going to do the airdrop, you don't want to say too much because you don't want people to game it and ruin it for everybody. That's the first thing. And then they're also, like emitting tokens itself is kind of tricky from a regulatory perspective, and airdrops even more so, right? And so for these two reasons, I cannot give any detail on whether we're going to have an airdrop, and if so, like how it's going to work. At least not at this point. Sorry.
So, but
Actually,
more
okay,
likely.
fun fact, we actually made kind of like a specific like private joke sticker about this, which if you come visit us at Cosmoverse, we will have at the booth. We're really happy to hand them out if you're interested. Like, come check it out because I think it's hilarious.
Sadly, I won't be at Cosmos, but I would like to encourage everyone to appear there. You will be there, I guess, and
Yeah.
I hope next time I will be there. How about Asia? Like doing this maybe not Cosmoverse, but Bangkok is great place for events as well. Like I'm originally from Poland, and I was thinking like I'd love to see it in Warsaw. Now I'm here. I understand Hong Kong has restrictions, but come on, like Bangkok is like also great hotels to accommodate people. Food. So I think it's easier accessible than, I'm sorry, South America, but you are not convenient spot for the world. Unlike if someone lives in America, that's okay. So maybe one day in Asia, I'd love to appear there. So I hope I get the joke, regardless if I'm in Cosmoverse or not. Is there anything? Sorry.
I mean, probably. Like, I'm
Yeah.
I'm happy to send you one of these stickers in any case.
Please do. I can give you my personal address. I'm not such private person, so that's okay. Is there? I must be public. Like it's like I think
I mean,
people
that's
in
what you do as
crypto.
a YouTuber, I guess. So yeah, that makes sense.
If people in crypto love to be anonymous, but I think for like if you try to educate, make better content, hey, like you don't have to be a private person. I mean, if you build Tornado Cash, you might want it, but I'm just doing content. Like it's fine for me. I don't put myself at any risk. It's the personal decision. So that's I think for in certain situations, going public, fully public, it's quite good. Is there anything that people don't get about Neutron, and you are like, shit, it's not this? That you see they continuously repeat something, and you would like to correct them, or maybe there is something about Neutron that excites you so much that no one asks this, and you actually want to share, but like you don't get this question.
Yeah, I think there's at least one thing that is extremely underrated, which is like interchain queries. Like everyone is excited about interchain security, which understandably so. It's a pretty interesting feature. But at the same time, I think if you don't have a developer background, it makes it's not surprising that it's hard to understand why interchain queries are such a big deal. But like you have to imagine that interchain accounts, which people are starting to be reasonably aware of, interchain accounts without interchain queries are kind of useless because like if you don't know the state of that other blockchain, it's going to be very tricky for you to do anything meaningful there, right? And so the alternative would be to rely on an oracle. But so if you're going to be relying on a trusted off-chain solution to get the data, why not also rely on a trusted off-chain solution to actually pass the transaction to the other blockchain? And in this case, why even have IBC kind of, for transferring assets kind of. But so like, yeah, I think like interchain accounts are the ability to do stuff on other blockchains, and then interchain queries are the ability to know stuff on the other blockchain to see what's going on in the other blockchains, and they really work together. So yeah,
So
they are.
sorry to stop you. If I'm on Neutron with Interchain queries, I will be able to see what happens in other blockchains that exist in the IBC ecosystem.
So I
Is that
think perhaps a
correct?
better way to put it is like you will
Mhm.
be able to, create specific, well, it's not messages because that's for transactions, but like specific queries, so like specific questions that you can ask to the other blockchains to know what is the situation over there relevant to what you want to do. So for example, you can ask stuff like, what tokens does this user or account have, right? And maybe it's your account. That's one way you can prove that you own this amount of token on one chain, right? So you make a question that you can send to the other blockchain, and then depending on which implementation you're using, it's going to work a bit differently at the technical level. But the general idea is that you will obtain the data, and you will obtain a way to prove that the data is valid, right? That it is correct, and that can be bridged back to your zone, and so you can prove on the zone you were from that this is the situation over there, which is really
Something just popped to my head, and I wonder if it's actually possible to do. So you let's give example of Etherscan, which we have Minscan, right? But on Etherscan, if you all the assets, ERC20 assets, you can see the account holding all of the ERC20 assets. And I'm not sure if that's something that that interchain queries would be helpful with. Of course, the Cosmos chains are different because that are sovereign chains. But your Cosmos address also has its own. Like if you have Cosmos address, you have this address representation on the Neutron chain, Juno chain, and Starbase chain, right? You could make the connections. I wonder if there is possibility of creating Explorer via using that interchain queries. Maybe I'm totally wrong, like I'm just and actually be able to have the Explorer that is able to, which is like loss of privacy, but have the Explorer that view these multiple wallets assets under
So I think the
the.
first thing is that like explorers need a way to source the data from the blockchain, right? And so, I mean, you could imagine an explorer that is like running one node on, let's say, Neutron, and then using Neutron to query all the other blockchains to show data for its explorer. But that would be like the worst implementation possible of an explorer. What Minscan does and most other explorer do is that they run validators or nodes on all of the networks that they support, and this way they can source the data directly from the blockchains. Without having to go through IBC to get that data. Basically, they can get it from the blockchain itself. So that's the first thing. And then, doing this, like, for example, if you try to parse what is the total balance of a user across all the supported chains, instead of going, like checking one address on one zone and then kind of like sending interesting queries to other zones, you can simply just the way your address in Cosmos works is that you have one private key, kind of like the hash, and then that is derived into specific addresses for all of the different networks. So like Cosmos, blah blah blah, on Cosmos Hub, Osmo, whatever, on Osmosis, etc. But actually, behind the scenes, unless you created multiple wallets, it's the same seed. And so what they can do is simply send that address. Like they take the seed, they derive most likely it's more like they derive from your address your other addresses on other networks, and then they ask their nodes to kind of get the data for your for your address on all the other zones that they support. So it's like interesting queries are not really required for this. I think interesting queries really become interesting when you start when you put yourself in the position of a protocol or an app chain that is trying to know or like prove the situation of a distant blockchain in order to do something, right? So, for example, if I want to do a swap on another chain, I want to prove, like perhaps I want to know what the swap rate is going to be, right? Or to have a better idea of what it's going to be. So I can use interchain queries to obtain information about, what is the swap price that I'm going to get. Another alternative is kind of like, for example, if you take a money market, you could imagine a money market for the interchain where you can deposit collateral on one chain, for example, let's say Osmosis, and then you can borrow on another chain, for example, Neutron. So what you can do here is that the protocol is like, yeah, I'm okay to lend you money, but first I need to check that you have the collateral. So I'm going to ask the question, how much collateral has this user deposited on the others on the other zones where it could have deposited collateral? And then when I get the reply that yes, this user has deposited however much money into our protocol, then I can lend you the money.
Get it. With that, I do think we covered everything. Maybe the last question: what's the best liquid staking solution we have?
That we have currently,
right? I don't think there's many. I think I know only one.
Yeah. I will refrain from commenting.
Right. Do you think this? Because I hear a lot of voices about the other liquid staking solutions come. Are they really better solutions, or it's just the marketing or the words they use?
What do you mean better solutions?
There was often like I know Pupmos is working on something, right? Quicksilver and many others, and they often would say like, "Hey, we actually are better than them," but I don't know in what way.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I was gonna say. Like, I think it's easier to make it better liquid staking protocol if you don't define what better is, because you can make a better liquid staking protocol in terms of the asset that you give the derivative. It's somehow more convenient or more integrated, more liquid, or it has whatever new feature that makes it convenient for some reason. That's one way you can make it better. Another way you can make it better is by having more features in your liquid staking. So for example, Quicksilver is doing something that is a bit interesting, which is like proxy governance, right? This is an interesting feature, right? Like the way it's implemented is a bit rough. It's like using 100 accounts to kind of like roughly represent the stake, but it's very interesting. So it's better in the way that it has this feature on top, which is interesting. And then there's making a better liquid staking in terms of the network's perspective. And then once you start getting into that area, then it becomes a very, very tricky question, because validation is a very complex topic, right? And so there are many approaches to this. Some protocols give the delegates, the users, the choice of their validators, right? Experience usually shows that this is suboptimal because it leads to centralization of stake, just like we see in the current delegation space. Like you have top validators who have like much more voting power compared to like the bottom one, and so you often have this kind of concentration when you give user the choice of who they delegate with. Other protocols have kind of like an in-bit, like other protocols have a fully automated management of the stake, where you stake with the protocol, you don't know exactly, like you may know which validators are included in the set, but you might not know exactly how your stake is going to be split. So that's one other extreme. If the system is properly designed, then that can be interesting in helping decentralize stake or sponsoring, like infrastructure, like validators with good infrastructure, good processes, good teams, good security practices, whatever. So that can be interesting, but it's also a bit restrictive. And then you have kind of an in-between where some protocols use incentives to kind of try and direct people to voting for performant validators. But the problem there is that the definition of performance is based on on-chain criteria, which only give you visibility on a very, very small portion of what makes a good validator. Because on-chain you can basically check, have they missed block? Have they been slashed? Do they participate in governance? What's their uptime? That kind of parameters. But actually, when you look into validation a bit seriously, you realize that there are many, many more factors. Like, are they running their validators on their own servers? Are they running them on their own premises or in a data center? Are they running it on shared or dedicated servers in those data centers? If they're running in third-party service providers, is it Hetzner? Is it AWS? Is it Google Cloud? How many of the validators of the network are running on the same provider? How many are running in the same data center? Like, is that data center so used? Maybe it's great, but is it so used that if it burns down, the network will shut down because everybody's using it? Are all the validators in the same country? Are all of the validators incorporated in the same country? You have all of these layers of that are actually very important if you want to build a truly resilient decentralized system. And I think a lot of the approaches that either give user full control or rely on on-chain parameters to manage everything, kind of, they are able to do a very good job for some of the aspects of what makes a good validator set, but then they kind of that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg. And so, there are many different approaches. None of them is perfect. There are trade-offs everywhere. But yeah, I think what would be beneficial to the discussion here is to recognize that validation is not as simple as just uptime and missed blocks, and to kind of as a community really focus on educating ourselves onto all of the various aspects that come into validation. And I think Cosmos is kind of blessed in this regard because validators have historically been very active, and so if we continue to give them the stage to explain how it works more and more, and kind of grow our understanding as a community, I think we will get to a point where the debates are going to be much more interesting. So I guess that would be my take.
Yeah. And another really good take, especially I saw some answers because people ask, hey, which validator to choose? And often come those who don't miss the blocks. Then choose the ones that use AWS. I mean, that's essentially because more likely if you run bare metal at home, you will miss more blocks than the person running somewhere in the cloud or renting the server. So there's no really the simple answer.
Exactly.
But then, of course, running bare metal at home, you have backups because you might get some certain problems because you as the
flooded or have a fire. Yeah, exactly. Right. So at the individual level for each validator, there are already trade-offs that you need to consider. But then when you take a step back, you also need to look at the set as a whole, actually, because that's probably where it matters the most. Because running on AWS, for example, is not a bad thing per se. As you said, you're probably going to have a better uptime if you're using AWS, which means that it makes sense that it would be a good setup, right? If you have a better performance, it's a better setup. Except if everybody is running on AWS, then the network has a single point of failure. So when you approach the set, you should want to further the overall quality of the setups, but also the distribution and the decentralization of the setup. Make sure that no one choice, no one option for setting up your validator gets too much of the voting power, so that if there is a problem on this specific area, then the whole network doesn't crumble, basically.
Thank you. So I think it's good moment to finish. I hope it was a good conversation for you. I hope we were able. I mean, those who watch were able. There is 11 people right now live. They just. I think it's because they were impressed with the information they are getting. So I'm pretty sure more people will watch it. If you're watching it now, I've been struggle with the timestamps. I'm actually just myself doing this. So if some of you wants to add timestamps to this video, you can just send me them on Twitter. If not, maybe I will try to do it so we can have them and we can listen to different take of Spaydh on the certain subjects. And Spaydh, to
Sounds
you,
amazing.
uh,
I
thank
love
you
how
so
you're
much.
decentralizing timestamps.
Yeah, like it's really difficult because like this video is like 90 minutes, right? I would have to actually not fully watch 90 minutes, but I
Yeah.
sometimes do
Oh, I know.
interviews
Like
every day.
I've dealt with video quite a bit, so like derushing and watching the same
Yeah.
90-minute video over and over again to find like all this. Like, yeah, I know how it feels.
And then
It's
you
a
have to watch yourself, which is like the worst part. Like I don't watch my interviews, and once I never watch my videos even after recording. Like I edit them, but it's just the parts. But you just don't want to go,
listen to
over
yourself for an hour and a half. Yeah.
that process. Is the So yeah, thank you for your takes. Thank you for your time. Uh, Hopefully, great success to you at Neutron and great success to Neutron. I'm looking forward, and I'm pretty sure once you are launching, we have some more information. We are going to chat again, of course, if you would want to. So thank you for
For
this,
sure.
and enjoy
Anytime.
the rest of your day.
See you, everybody. Have a good
Thank
one.
you.